Welcome, everybody. I know people are still joining, but we will go ahead and get started in the interest of keeping things on time. So my name is Jenny Hornick. I'm the digital marketing specialist at JMIR Publications, and I'm very excited to welcome you to another one of our monthly webinars in collaboration with the Society of Digital Psychiatry and JMIR Mental Health. Today, we have a very exciting topic. We're going to be discussing digital phenotyping and making it more clinically meaningful. So we'll dive into that shortly. But before we do, I just wanted to highlight a couple of housekeeping items. So first of all, you will notice that your microphones are muted and they will remain muted for the duration of the session. But we do invite questions, and you can ask them by using the Q&A box, which is located just towards the bottom of your screen. So if you have any questions that come up during the discussion, just drop them there, and we will have a Q&A portion towards the end of the webinar. We also are recording the session, so you'll be able to access the recording later. I'll be sending it out over email, and it'll also be on our YouTube channel, so you'll be able to share it with any colleagues who weren't able to attend today. So that is all for me, and I will go ahead and introduce Dr. John Torous, who will kick things off and introduce today's guest. So Dr. Torous is the director of the Digital Psychiatry Division at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, which is an affiliated teaching hospital of Harvard Medical School. And he's also the editor-in-chief of JMIR Mental Health and the co-founder of the Society of Digital Psychiatry. So I will ask everyone to join me in welcoming Dr. John Torous.
Thank you, Jenny, and to JMIR and SODP for hosting this. I'm happy to introduce our guest today. So Dr. Ortiz, who we have with us, completed her medical training in Mexico and then went up north and did postgraduate studies at McGill and Dalhousie University. She then went a little bit south and is now an associate professor in the Department of Psychiatry at UT Southwestern, where she leads computational psychiatry program, a very hot topic. She's an expert in bipolar disorder, and her research focuses on understanding mood regulation and forecasting episodes of illness, predicting when people may become manic or depressed, using mathematical models and wearable technologies. She's been the principal investigator on numerous grants, including from the NIMH, the Canadian Institute of Health Research, and the American Foundation for Suicide Research. So, Dr. Ortiz, thank you so much for joining us. And we're going to focus a little bit on digital phenotyping, sensors from wearables and smartphones, where it all goes. And I'm going to put in the chat a fascinating paper that you co-authored for people to see that we're going to kind of be able to refer to and put people in. But I guess what I want to start out with is this idea of digital phenotyping. Bruce Rollman at Pittsburgh has said it should be called digital phonotyping, and I'm going to give him credit. It's a very clever name, digital phonotyping. But what is digital phenotyping as we know it today?
Thank you for inviting me. I'm very happy to have this chat with you, with all the audience. I think this is also a timely topic because digital, if you just think about the root of the word digital, we live in a digital world. So you have digital information coming at you and from you all the time, from your watch and your rings and your Whoop and your bands for sleep, but also from all your Instagram and Facebook. So it's really the collection of information that comes from any digital device, and that could be your phone or your wearable.
Got it. And I think originally digital phenotyping may have started out with thinking the phone has a lot of sensors and devices on it. Do you think digital phenotyping, as you kind of were implying, has expanded to different devices, or are there a couple devices that it really is focused on?
I think it's definitely expanding for sure. So there are sensors everywhere, right? And the sensors are like smaller and smaller. So you can have sensors in earrings. I read a paper about that, or like in vests, in shirts, in rings or watches. So I think anything that contains a sensor and it will gather information from you or from a subject is digital phenotyping.
And thinking of that, what are the range of things we can collect and sense, of course, that are relevant to behavioral health and to mental health? As you said, there's sensors for
Yeah.
everything, but what is kind of the spectrum? And let's talk about the ones that are most perhaps exciting or relevant for everyone here.
Yes. So the ones I'm going to start with the ones that we cannot collect, and
Okay.
that's moods. For sure, a sensor in itself, just objectively, cannot tell you how you feel. That's still a very subjective experience, and I think that mood is a result of the sleep you had last night, the amount of exercise you do, hormonal status, other viral illnesses. So mood's like a composite behavior that cannot be collected in a sensor. But sensors can collect from very basic activity kind of categories. For example, the number of steps, or heart rate variability, respiratory rate, heart rate, how you sleep. And then every company has its own kind of algorithm. So within the sleep, for example, you can see REM and non-REM parameters, hours of sleep, and so on throughout the day, or throughout minute by minute, for example.
Yeah. And I like that saying, it alone cannot predict mood or your internal state. The sensors often collect things external or behaviors. And I'm thinking back to historically, I think there was like a whole behaviorism movement in the mental health field in earlier generations, and it did not seem to work out, at least from what history said, with what Skinner did. And so we're definitely not trying to invent behaviorism 2.0
No.
in this.
Yeah, I agree.
But as you said, with this kind of range of different signals that can be on a second to second or minute to minute basis, I think the first thing that always comes to mind, as it should, is what are some of those ethical implications or risks that need to be considered?
Yeah. And I think for me, and for all the participants or patients, privacy is huge. So I think privacy is paramount. And it's not only privacy about sending your data somewhere, but also how do you want to use your data? Who is going to use your data and what for, right? So it comes across as wearing a ring or wearing a watch is way more, going beyond step count, exactly as that paper said, because it's not only about the number of steps, it has other implications. So not only in the sense of privacy in this case, but also for the subject, for your own health. How do you think about yourself? And as a researcher, how do you conceptualize health overall? Because you need this framework to make sure you take care of your participants and your patients. And that's why I think we need like a stepped approach. It's not like,
Thanks. And
give
in
me
some
your
way,
data.
all the devices we talked about, be it different smartphones or watches or sensors, I mean, someone is getting the data. The company that usually made the device is getting the data and doing, I guess we don't really know what. Do we think that the companies are doing things with the data from your sense of the literature or what's happening in the space?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I think, they collect probably more information about us than we know. And not only from sensors, from any of the activities we do online.
And I would imagine, again, all this, we're talking about kind of IRB or ethics-informed research where people sign consent. So I think, though, if you almost think of like research should be not create risks that people don't have in ordinary life, you could almost argue, I wonder, is the data being used by so many other parties that we're not even exposing people to greater risk if we do research in an ethical, safe way on the sensors?
Yeah. And I think there is a disconnect, for example, when models, you have a model developed every day, and then the clinic is lagging behind. But the ethical part of the story is even behind that. So we need like a parallel kind of a stream where we can really be mindful of what we're doing with that data for research purposes, but also as a society, ethical. What does that mean?
It makes sense. And it makes me think of Camille Nebaker had done some interesting ethical work at UC San Diego with her center on some of those things for people to refer to on it. But again, recognizing the ethics, and again, there's certainly some ethical issues, but the risks the risks may again change as society changes, as you said too. The data, right, is only if you get a list of my accelerometer that says kind of John's gravity is always 9.8 in this axis because he's on Earth and he moved at this point. getting a raw data dump of accelerometer files is not very useful for clinical research. And I think one of the challenges in the field has been turning kind of these signals, and as you said, they could be really frequent, multiple times a second, a minute, into clinically actionable measures or research measures. What are the leading thoughts on that? And we can talk about the challenges of why maybe it's been so hard.
Yeah. Well, I'm a physician, I'm a psychiatrist, so I think in general, and I work with these very, very smart guys, engineers, a computer scientist, and then they work a lot, they develop their models, and then their model, after all these simulations, and then they do this, and they use this program and algorithm, they tell me that, step count is higher in people who are hypomanic compared to those when they're depressed. Yes, we all know that. So my framework is always, I already know that, any clinician knows that, we need to go beyond. So that's where I think it's not only about, and step count is just an example, but in general, if you count steps, let's say every day, and I count steps every 8 hours, and some other researchers averages them for a month, the results are going to be so different that it's going to be super complicated to integrate them into really a framework that defines or kind of integrates health or disease.
I think that's a critical point, and maybe to repeat it in a related way. If I have my set of sensors from my phone and I create step count with my algorithm and you create yours at UT Southwestern, your algorithm, there's really no way to replicate each other's work or to reproduce it. As you said, it's easy enough to find a pattern in the data. But is it that if we don't have some fundamental standards for working with the data that we're all going to be doing in isolation?
Yeah, I think that's a big problem in our field, because there is nothing standardized. So you can do, your sample size of 20 and use a specific, sensor, and then I can do 200 with a different one. So in the end, I think we, starting from scratch and the basics, we really need to just think really, really well, what do we want to measure and how, and start from there.
And I think what you and I have both seen is, even if you tell the phone or watch, I can make it up, give me a movement measure every 10 seconds, it doesn't always do it. It's a piece of technology. It shuts off, the battery goes away, it goes into low power mode, someone takes it off. So this idea of missing data is interesting, because the question is, how do you handle it? And if you impute the mean and just say it's all the same and I ignore it, what are the best ways to kind of deal with this hidden problem of missing data, but a very real one in digital phenotyping?
That's a huge problem. Actually, we published a paper maybe a year or two ago on missing data ratio. And missing data, it's, I would say, a whole topic on itself. But the fundamental part of the story, because people ask me, how come you have 80% compliance in terms of you're asking participants to do things every day for 2 years and people don't give up. How do you do it? Really, there is no secret. The secret is, the clinical relationship is paramount. You don't squeeze it in afterwards. From the get-go, it's there. Because of course, at the end, you're helping patients. It's not that, it's not that AI will save us. It won't. Technology is a tool, but in the end, it has to be fundamentally clinical. When, and that's, I would say, step one. But step two, when let's say they are compliant, but sometimes they forget to charge the device, you can create strategies to not lose your data, because as you've heard, many of you have heard, garbage in, garbage out. And if you have, let's say, a study that goes for a year, but only 50% of your sample stayed until, month 12, and of those who stayed, 30% contributed 50% of data. At the end, you have a tiny bit of data that you cannot average, because, of course, every participant is going to be different. My days will look different from yours. So it's average, I would say, is not the best idea. Check that paper if you can. It's called Missing Data Ratio, and we basically calculate a ratio of missing data for each patient, so that we don't put everyone in one bag. we are all different, but that we can see what's happening. We actually found that missing data is clinically relevant when people
So it's a
are
signal.
changing.
So it's a
When they
signal
are
itself.
changing polarity. Yes.
Yeah. And in parallel, what we found in our team, of course, the best way to fix missing data is not to have it. It's impossible, but we've also done a lot of work on trying to visualize digital phenotyping data or give people back insights, again, because then people get excited. They say, I'm collecting this and I learned something from it.
Yeah.
And of course, we have to be tempered in our claims because it's new data. So we can't say we're giving you validated information, but in some ways helping people understand their steps in sleep and how it corresponds to their mood, anxiety, that can be in some ways even therapeutic information because you're helping people build emotional self-awareness. So I know we're talking about monitoring digital phenotyping.
Yeah.
There may be some immediate clinical applications. Do you have thoughts on the therapeutic potential of data sharing in this space?
So I'm going to tell you first what not to do from my perspective. Starting today with an RCT, it's still like we're not there yet. If we don't even know what to collect, how to measure so that everybody is on the same page, then you're going to do an RCT and then my results won't be comparable and so on. So I would say we start from the very beginning. But what we see in clinical populations is what cardiology or oncology or pain medicine have seen, where people who are very sick actually are very compliant. So people who have higher rates of arrhythmias, for example, will wear their monitor more often. And we saw the same. People who are actually depressed or getting depressed, they will wear the monitor more often. They will be more compliant. So I would say if we start from this clinical fundamental pillar, and then we find a method to not average the data, but just to know why was it missing and why is it important, then we can build on that like stepwise. So that in the end, we can do a good clinical trial, knowing how to analyze the information.
I think that's a practical path forward, as you said, with it. And I feel like I have to ask this question because everyone loves this question. Can AI just fix it?
No, I don't think so. I think AI is a tool and we're all excited about the tool, but I don't think, in the end, medicine and in particular psychiatry, I think it's human nature. And no AI or algorithm, in my opinion, will save us or fix it. Because again, the interaction with others or, just environment in general will affect us in a way that AI cannot get it.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll see interesting efforts of people trying it. And again, there's definitely advances to be made in AI with it, but it's hard if AI needs patterns. Again, if we've had different, it's very good at recognizing patterns and following patterns. And if we're talking about new data that we don't understand what it means, we're not saying here's a pattern and we always know it. So I agree with you. If we said we always know that home time means more depression, that would make sense. But we don't actually even have those relationships done. And one thing in our case is we did do a digital phenotyping study and found that for some people, high home time was associated with more depression, and for some people, it was less depression. And at first, we were confused of what it was, and then we asked our participants, and our participants politely said again, you guys are not very clever. Some people said I have a very supportive home environment. Some people said I have a very unsupportive home environment, and it's not the fact that I am at home, it is what does home mean? And that is something you have to ask me. So we've definitely made our protocols and ways we do it. You still need the subjective data in it. It's not
Absolutely.
It's not all of that, but that was definitely a very humbling experience and a very good wake-up call because it just realizes we can collect some things from sensors, but we cannot collect everything in it. So if we're saying AI is not the path forward, we've probably disappointed half the audience. What is the path forward then?
Yeah, I have to say we have to work more on that. And at least it will take us another decade. Somebody asked me recently, but how much, how fast can we go?
Yeah.
If you want to do things right, you really need to think it through and do all the heavy lifting. And if you really want to, just have a framework, conceptualize the illness, develop new medications, I don't think asking any LLM will just fix the world, right? it will take time. I think the next step is really to be on the same page and decide what is that I have to pay attention to. I always think about my clinical days and I'm like, go, 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 one patient after another, new patients.
Yeah.
And they bring you your data. I'm sure they bring you their sensor data. What do I pay attention to? And I know about wearables, that's my specialty. But there is so much data, right? So what is telling me that someone is getting sick? How can I answer their questions? So I think the first step is really to just be very clear about what do I need to pay attention to? Is it steps? Is it sleep? Is it steps for you, patient A, but sleep for patient B, or for different illnesses, for different polarities? That I would say that's step number one.
Yeah. No, I do agree there has to be some consensus or definition, or at least agreement. Again, everyone can use their own sensors, their own devices, but at least some way that we can translate between devices and parts of it, because else it's really tricky. And I think that's one of the efforts why I'm excited about Society of Digital Psychiatry. It can try to become a convening organization to at least make that crosswalk between different devices. So no one's going to say this is the one way to do it, but at least have a way that you can translate what you get from a Fitbit, from an Apple device, from a Whoop, and whoever knows whatever other devices there are. But because in some ways you could say if you had that crosswalk, you can also get much larger data sets very easily too. Like you increase your sample size, and as we know, that's going to let an expert like you in computation be happier. You're going to have more precision and accuracy in your results.
Yeah. And I think that's the other piece that sometimes people ask me, so what's the wearable that you recommend? Like, what's the best? And I tell them that there is nothing, number one. Everything measures different things in different ways for different outcomes. So going back to your question, the clinical kind of part of the story is the most relevant. What do you want to measure? Then you can tailor what wearable you need. But there is nothing that, I would say, oh, this is the best for X, Y, and Z. Absolutely not.
Yeah. So maybe we'll switch over to some questions for about the next 8 minutes or half past the hour. If you have any, put them in now. And I see one question saying you brought up the important point of context, understanding digital solutions like time at home. Can we use additional sensors to get context like ambient light or sound? Because in theory, we could know that I'm isolated in my house. I have, like, how far can we get on extra sensors for context?
Yes, I think so. And actually, there was a conference just a few months ago where people talk about sensors in the walls where you can detect movement. And this was, I think, directed for participants with Parkinson's. Very smart, very interesting. I had to do something with ultrasound. I have a colleague in Sweden who does that for people with postpartum depression. So it's coming, but again, this is something, it's the gap that we have to close, where you actually have these models being developed. Are we ready to use them in the clinic? I would say not yet. They are coming. But for sure, we need this kind of infrastructure, this framework to make sure they are safe and that they are clinically valid.
Yeah. But I imagine we can get a little bit more insights on what happens. Again, we'd have to be very careful on the ethics, but certainly how many people are having a conversation. Is it and again, there's many reasons that can be tricked or not correct. And so a related question is, as you said, it depends on what we're asking, but do you think there's kind of sensors we should pay more attention to, or to have kind of, if you had to pick one to do all your research on in the future, is it sleep? Is it steps? Is it audio? Is it keyboard speed? Is it LiDAR, this new kind of radar detection from phones? Like, is there one that makes you most excited, if that's the right way to phrase the question?
Actually, no. So it depends on the question. For example, we have studies on, cardiovascular morbidity in bipolar, as you know, is huge. So we use a different wearable for that. What we are trying to do now is to see, amongst all this information that as a clinician I get, when someone is depressed, or if I'm worried about someone, for example, who gets manias, psychotic manias frequently, what do I pay attention to? And it turns out that, yes, there are different digital biomarkers that will be relevant for different parts of the illness. In this sense, for a hypomanic or manic episode, it will be sleep. For a depressive episode, it will be steps. So it's not like you have one overall that I will pay attention to everything,
Yeah.
because it will depend on the phase of the illness, but also I think it will depend on the illness itself. Maybe, for, schizophrenia is going to be a different story compared to major depression.
Which kind of matches clinically. There's a different diagnostic workup we usually do if we suspect someone may have bipolar versus depression versus OCD. And there's some commonalities, of course, too, in it. This question says, what's your perspective on tools that surface insights patterns that indicate early onset of mental health via AI or machine learning? Basically using it as a companion to therapy or psychiatry versus a replacement. But I imagine, again, I think I even saw an ad from Fitbit now saying, like, we will collect your data as an individual and we'll give you some AI insights based on your data. So in some ways it's coming, or it's starting already. And they are going to try to offer insights. Do we like it? Do we believe it? Are we worried? Are we excited?
I worry. I have to be honest, I worry. The reason I worry is because exactly we don't have a framework yet. So I know, for example, the LLMs, like any ChatGPT, for example, or any other company will tell you, you can tell me how you feel. And I think we're starting to understand how important is connecting with someone, but we don't know yet how LLMs work. Like, we don't know exactly what they are, right? So you are going to put a lot on trust of them. And then what? I would prefer, maybe people will feel like I'm a little bit too paranoid, but I prefer to be careful in the sense that I care about participants. So I wouldn't just put everything there yet. I need to know how is it going to be used, by whom, and what will happen in the case of an emergency, for example.
Yeah. This is an interesting question, saying we see a lot of digital phenotyping work around sleep. It's very important for all mental illnesses. I think if you count in a DSM, sleep comes up the most or second most as both a symptom or sign of mental illness. But a lot of the sleep digital phenotyping papers don't really have strong clinical validation. Like, they're not getting a gold standard of sleep. Can we rely on sleep, or what do we do with it? And also, I'm putting a preprint that our team has done that we haven't showed you, but it's certainly something I've worried about is sleep. Do we even trust digital phenotyping sleep today, I guess, is what it gets down to.
Yeah. Yeah, that's also something I've been thinking about. The problem with the sleep, at least, from the very basic concept, is that your sensors will lose battery, right? And then you're not awake, 24 hours per day to charge it. If they lose battery, they won't capture any sleep-related metrics. So then the machine will give you something, but it's coming back again to garbage in and garbage out. Garbage in means, for example, no data. The machine still will give you a result, and how do you know if it's accurate or not? And the other issue is that people worry about that. Some patients worry about that. And if it's not accurate, I wouldn't say it's fair to, like, make people worry about that.
And one of my earlier experience in digital phenotyping I've shared is we had a patient in a study, and by our sleep measure, he was always moving and never sleeping for like 2 days. And I was like, this is going to, we're going to meet the patient. I said, this is amazing. This person has been constantly moving for 2 days by the digital phenotyping. He must be manic. And then he came in, looked very calm, collected, and well. I said, but you haven't slept for 2 days. And he said again, John, you're not very clever. I shared a phone with my son. My son works the night shift. And I went, ooh. And again, so
Yes.
it's very humbling to kind of have these clinical interactions. But like you, I'm worried if we don't have standards to validate it. And that one has also struck with me. We have to be careful. Maybe we'll do some rapid fire questions. Are there wearable devices used to monitor voice using vocal biomarkers? Can digital phenotyping do voice, and how?
There are some. I haven't used them myself, but I know some people in, I think, Michigan have used them in bipolar. The issue is, again, cleaning the data, because the device will collect not only your voice, but any noise around you.
Yeah, but I'll say using the smartphone just to do audio recordings, it's actually a pretty high quality microphone in most smartphones. When you get a phone call, the phone companies compress the signal so it sounds tinny. But if you just record audio from the phone, it's it's a pretty decent way to get, again, digital phenotyping data for voice. The raw data, as we talked about, there's a whole world of what you do with the data and how you validate it and deal with missingness. In that, at this point, Maybe one final question. I'm curious on your take on clinicians' interest education in digital phenotyping. Is there interest? For what specific applications are hearing interest? What are the greatest pain points in digital phenotyping could support? What does education on these technologies look like in a curriculum? So kind of the work all of us do kind of in translating it.
Yeah, huge interest and huge needs, I would say. So if it was to me, I would start training students, medical students, in how to use it, how to interpret it, how to design it, how to help the patient from the very get-go. And if you are already a physician, then I would start really just putting out there, making sure people understand the safety, the ethical concerns, what to do, how the basic about the wearables, how it works, things like that. I think the more we educate ourselves and more we educate our patients, I think the safer this whole enterprise is going to be.
Yeah, I will say among our junior clinicians, we're a training program. Our residents and medical students are very interested in this technology and do want to learn. But there is a little bit of a gap, is Dr. Adler, who brought this question, is we don't always have the best uniform training for it. And if you want clinicians to use it, you got to train them in it. So that is a good opportunity as well outside of the data we've talked about. But again, we try to keep these webinars focused but brief, so we've used our time. So thank you so much, Dr. Ortiz. It's a fascinating conversation. We look forward to following more of your work as you start up at UT Southwestern. So thank you for talking with us, and for everyone else, until next time.
Thank you. Bye.